Okay, if everybody would please rise, and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Howdy all, welcome to our General Club meeting for February. I'm sure that you're going to thoroughly enjoy the presentation tonight. We have a variety of other things to cover, and we'll try to go through those pretty quickly. Conrad, you got anything to report about the repeaters and technical side?
Yeah, we got plenty to report. Let's see. Okay. OSA 130, there's been some reports of a little bit of noise on there. It sounds like maybe the squelch might have gone down. We've had really issues with the pot on that one in the past. So actually going to be up there Sunday, so I'll give a quick check on that one, see if we can clean that up quickly or not. Beyond that, we're going to do some measurements, get ready to plan where we do some rerouting of cables for some repeaters to go in the future. Work on control modules for that as well, so we can control them from off the hill. Hopefully those are going in the very near future, just got to wrap up the final items for them. Otherwise, I think that's really most of it for the site. Everything else, from what I know, has been working well, except for 130 for a little bit of squelch noise. Right.
6 meters? Go to 6 meters.
Who knows?
Okay, Conrad was nice not to request it, so I will. Here's an opportunity. I think you probably read my notes about volunteering, etc., etc. Here's an opportunity, if Conrad wants it, to have somebody who's interested in seeing the repeater site and see all the goodies up there to join Conrad on that little work party. And if you choose to do so, see Conrad before the meeting's over and you can make arrangements. Site chair.
Hello.
Howdy.
As Conrad said, we're going to go up to the site on Sunday, this Sunday. It's really a narrow scope item. We're going to do a review of the property, make sure it looks okay, we'll probably check the antennas, make sure, see if there's any damage. None's been reported as of yet. Assess what the repeaters need, like you said, for the cables. What we're going to prepare for next month is really going to be a good project up there. We got a trailer up there that needs to be unloaded, so we can turn the trailer back to the owner. Got a couple of larger items there that is not have a tractor available to unload them.
And I would say, did the tractor have some trouble loading it? Was that heavy?
The tractor was happy, but it was a lot easier than 4 guys showing up at the same place at that time. 4 to 6 people would be really nice to have up there. 6 people means less manpower needed for each item. There's really not that much, it's just bulk when it gets down to it. A little bit of site maintenance, and that's really going to be it. But we're looking at March 8th. Typical work party times is 10 o'clock at Mother's Kitchen. For Mother's Kitchen is for those that have not been there before. We'll take them over from there to the repeater site. We'll make sure that there's no APRS operating at the time. We don't advertise where our site actually is.
Okay, weren't we planning for 11 because of the time change?
We're using 10 o'clock, whatever time zone we are in right now. If the time changes that day,
11.
whatever the change is, skip the hour, whatever it is, but we'll make it 10 o'clock this time zone.
So 11 o'clock, people.
Okay?
So just say 11 o'clock.
All right, 11 o'clock.
Of course, we could do it in Greenwich Mean Time, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, what's UTC on that one?
Who can subtract me from 7?
So, we'll go up there, we'll have a good day out of it. Try and get people the opportunity for someone who hasn't been to the site, they come up, look at the site, they can see what the current repeaters are up there, the current setup that we have, and maybe if you're interested, you learn a little bit more about the operating system of Palomar.
I thank you. Treasurer report, Richard. You got a comment? This is This is a way to remind you that nothing is free. And we do have operating expenses, and it's important that you see what those are.
For beginning January 1st, our balance was $4,119.20. For payouts, that includes SDG&E, AT&T, Cottage Printer, and the 5 new repeaters came up to $2,881. We had $491 come in for dues. RF Parts paid $144 for their magazine, and our balance is $1,729.12. And this is going to be put in every month, the newsletter. This will be posted.
Thank you, Richard. In case anybody is unaware, this is not the federal government. We can't print dollar bills. So it does cost money to run a club, just for you to keep that in mind. Ron Patton from Fallbrook wants to talk about the Fallbrook meeting next month. Ron, where'd you go? Oh, well, now's a chance for you to ad lib, Ron. I'm just acting on what I was asked to put up.
Coming this Saturday, N6KI is going to be there giving his presentation that he's given at many other clubs. So that's the high point.
3 o'clock Saturday
Where?
at the Scout Hut. It's 231 East Hawthorne.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Kevin, I saw Kevin. Kevin has been working to, a lot of us helped Kevin out last year with the Boy Scouts and the year before. Kevin is offering some pretty neat ideas about things that we might do to encourage young people to become active in technology. Kevin?
Sure, I'll come up real quick.
Yeah, after the last Jamboree over the air back in October, the San Diego Boy Scout Council approached me about using JOTA as the anchor event for a 3-day STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. So this is always the third week of October. Jamboree over the air is the largest event that brings Boy Scouts together over amateur radio. It's been going on for 57 years. So we've been putting together some ideas that are going to get pushed into a proposal where at PARC, strictly volunteer basis, where PARC can serve as a pool of volunteers to help Boy Scouts. So I'm in the process of putting that proposal together. I'll be maturing that over the next week or so, and then sharing that with the board. But stay tuned. What we're going to be asking is for some of those PARC members that want to participate to serve as volunteers, both for the radio merit badge as well as electronics and electricity, and help get Scouts on the air, and not just a one-shot deal, not just Jamboree over the air. So stay tuned for that. But you can also mark your calendar, and I'm going to send an email out about this and get this in the upcoming newsletter. The council asked us just on this past Saturday to be at the Boy Scout Fair at Qualcomm Stadium on April 18th. So PARC has the opportunity to have a strong presence. We'll do the radio merit badge, but I've been talking to some of the other hams in the club about really being quite visible and having some activities for the Scouts. There's probably, my guess is there's between 5,000 and 7,000 Scouts, Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts that attend the Scout Fair. This is a good opportunity. So stay tuned. There's going to be more to come, but again, we're looking at establishing a long-term relationship with the San Diego Imperial Council. So there's over 20,000 Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts in San Diego Imperial Council, So there's a lot of opportunity. And many of you may have been Boy Scouts. It was probably a few years back. And unless you're going to go home tonight and help bring young people and get together with your wife and have a few kids to bring people into the club, we're going to reach out to Boy Scouts. But have fun doing what I just suggested. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Kevin. Oh, he already knows. Oh, no, Thursday evening, what are you talking about?
You're asking for a net?
Yeah, just real briefly.
Oh, that.
Yeah, long story short, if you look on the net calendar, Thursday there's a young hams net that has been inactive for quite some time, and I've asked to use that spot. It's a half-hour spot on Thursdays at 7:30 for a Boy Scout net. And because we've done for those of you that looked at the January scope, you'll see all the activities that PARC has been involved in with Boy Scouts. It's getting a lot. So we're getting a lot of attention, and we're mixing in programming, electronics, electricity, and radio. And I'm putting radio at kind of the center of STEM activities. So stay tuned. We're really doing a lot, but we're going to need to scale up. We're going to need a pool of volunteers to help out in the future. And this would be regularly scheduled events either at Mattaway, Camp Mattack was a Boy Scout camp, and Camp Balboa, as well as Fiesta Island. And this will be things like the radio merit badge as well as other related merit badges. But the emphasis will be on hands-on, where you guys as licensed operators are Elmering the Scouts. Okay? All right, thanks, Charlie.
I think it's the 0:30.
I think you said 7:05 in the email.
Okay, 0:75. Okay.
I don't remember, but it's listed in the club website because all the nets are there, and the defunct young people's net would basically stay a young people's net dedicated to the Scouts. We've had an offer that we're looking into. I can't remember the organization. They're having a fair at Cardiff by the Sea on April 25th. And, I'm being told that it's up here. The San Dieguito Interfaith Ministerial Association on the 25th of April is offering, if we're interested, to have a booth. Last month when I did the survey, several members commented that they'd like to see the club involved with local activities beyond what we normally do. Here's one. We haven't researched what it's going to cost us yet. All these fairs cost money, but if you're interested in participating in a visible effort by ham radio, here comes one. Those of you who said you wanted to be involved in local activities, here's a chance. Anybody else have any announcements that you'd like to make? Okay, goodie table?
We have quite an assortment tonight, and I use the word assortment because there's all kinds of odds and ends here, from what looks like Heathkit manuals. We have quite a bit of cabling, circuit breakers. I brought this was a donation, thought they'd be good transport cases for go boxes. So anybody that wants a good transport case, you can put a lot of radio equipment in here, and it'd be an ongoing thing where you just you're ready to go when the big one hits. And other than that, it's all donations to the club as far as I know, so be generous and be reasonable and take it all home with you.
And if you're interested in getting into software design radios, right here. Anybody else? Greg, sorry. Greg.
Okay, meeting was held last Thursday. It's the last Thursday of the month for Sandar. A few interesting things transpired at the meeting. It was noted by one of the delegates of another club that in order to comply with the bylaws, it was necessary to hold a meeting in February and March. And this is all related to holding our elections. These are meetings that were taken away last year when Sandar decided to go to quarterly meetings rather than meetings on a monthly basis. It should be noted that when they did this last year, they failed to follow the bylaws and properly changing the meetings. Well, they're doing the same thing again to change them back. So that's interesting. Our secretary from Sandar, Mr. Mike Madsen, stepped down from his position. So Sandar is looking for a current secretary. If anyone is interested, contact board@sandar.net and it will go from there. Treasurer stepped down 2 months ago, or I guess I should say, when was that, October? A few months ago. One was appointed. The only issue now is the treasurer will need to be bonded. We're waiting to see how Sandar handles that. Sandar, it's all the same thing. Policies and Procedures Manual was presented. There was a section in the Policies and Procedures Manual regarding how to handle grievances. And it was rather interesting that that section referenced something about land. I said, well, Sandar doesn't own any land. That's kind of weird. So I started looking it up online. And I came across a document by another corporation, elvinhome.org. The parts that are highlighted are the parts that we plagiarized from the document, apparently.
Well, don't say we, say Sandar. Let's get
Yeah, I
this
guess I
right.
should say Sandar. So that was brought up to them. Joe asked me to look into it. I submitted this document to him, showing him the highlighted portions, and again, we'll wait for a response. That was interesting. PARC expressed their interest in Sandar to lead the way for the next Sandar convention. Sandar decided at the last meeting that we were not the best fit for doing so. And not only did they tell us they did not want us to run the convention, they made a motion that we could not offer for the position and no one could take the position until January of next year. They are creating a subcommittee in order to review how the convention went and to examine all the financials of the convention. So that's something that we will be interested to see from January. That's all I have. Thank you, Charlie.
As far as the copy plagiarized stuff, remember, nothing is more indicative of appreciation than to copy somebody else's work. Okay, just a brief introduction of folks. We've got the repeater site chair, Dennis, wherever you went to.
You guys should be back there.
We've got repeater technical, Conrad, whom you already heard. Our scope editor, Michelle, is not here. Director number 1, Jim, where'd you go? There's Jim over here. Greg is director number 2. In the back, Al and his lovely wife doing the things that are required to keep track of membership, the membership chair. Richard, treasurer, he stood up here and told you about all the money we have. Not enough to go to Verona. Gary, where's Gary? Our secretary, all the way in the back.
Taking minutes.
Joe, our vice president. And then you're stuck with me. Do we have any visitors tonight? Okay, would you please stand up and tell us a little bit about yourself, right over here.
My name is Wayne Van Dorn. I've been looking at trying to get in ham radio. I've known several hams, but I never got around to doing it. I've been trying to procure some old EO7 tube gear to tinker with when I get my license. And that's about it.
Well, you've come to the right place. This is radioactive here.
I'm Tom Struble. recently retired 5 years ago. I'm finally getting around to doing something I should do, which is I'm an off-roader and I'm a sailor, and 2 meters making a lot of sense. A lot of guys out off-road doing that. My boat skipper runs on that. So it's just time to sit down, and I've always had an interest in getting involved in this. And this is the time to do it.
Very good. I saw 2 different hands over here. Let me take the first one.
Tony Gallup, KJ6 UFG. Actually, I work in Carlsbad and I live up in Orange County. I was here last month as well.
Welcome. Bruce Hill, KU0B. Not retired yet, wife won't let me do that. So I'm still working full-time. I've been a ham since 12, and I'm heavy into D-Star.
Very good. You had your hand up.
Yeah, name's Nick. I live down in La Mesa, so a little stretch up here, but there's a few good guys in this room. I know Eagle Scout as well, to the scouting point that was made earlier, so there's a lot of upcoming interest that I have. New to Braham Radio myself. KK6MZC, if you hear me. And that's my story.
Well, welcome to all of you. Oh, we have one more. John, that's right.
I'm John, AC7GK, the electric geek from Seven Land, and just moved out from Orange County. Active in SOAR up there, active at April Mill as a certified hospital communicator in the hospital group in emergency communications for 25 years. Just joined the club tonight. It's nice to be here.
Oh, thank you. Again, thanks for joining us. Hopefully you'll find the presentation of interesting.
This guy just got his extra ticket. He's so painfully shy, he won't get up and say it.
Really? What are you going to do with an extra ticket if you're painfully shy?
Go ahead.
Yeah, just got an extra, and that's...
Hey, Charlie, give him a mic.
I'm sorry?
Give him a mic, see if he is shy.
This is what extras do on sideband.
Well, I was expecting I have to say anything, but
Name, rank, and serial number.
name is Jake, call sign is KJ6IKZ.
Okay, well, congratulations. Okay, we're going to move on to our program tonight, which I think you will find. How many people read the scope? How many people did not get the scope yet?
Probably everybody.
We think we have a solution for that. Stay tuned. Ron, K2RP, and John, K6KOI, are going to regale us with the whole science, if you will, of classic radios, how to obtain them, maintain them, and restore them. And so, without further ado, Ron and John, it's all yours.
Thanks, Charlie. Oh, good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out. We had so many programs on high-tech types of programs. We wanted equal time for the rest. And John and I both collect old radios, call them vintage radios, boat anchors, radios that glow in the dark, whatever you call them, it's all the same stuff. And there's a number of others in the audience here who suffer from the same disease. So why do we do it? Why do we spend our time with these 50, 60, 70-year-old radios? Well, people collect things, especially when you get to our age. There's people with old cars and old everything else that reminds us of our youth. Have a chance to own and operate some of the radios that when we were 13 years old we couldn't dream of owning. Keeps us interesting, and it's a challenge to keep some of them working. So that's really our main motive. It's also important, if you have an interest in history, to maintain these items and preserving them for future generations. Some people, for example, want to recreate their novice station or other radios that they've owned. Matter of fact, my novice station consisted of these two pieces here, not these particular ones, but this is a Heathkit AT1 transmitter. People remember Heathkit. This was the first amateur radio product. Came out in 1952. I didn't get mine used until 1959. And this was an immediate post-war Hallicrafters receiver called an S38 from 1946. And when I got my license in 1959, that's what I used. And we made contact with them. And I still get them on the air once in a while. And they still work. John, if you want to take over the next.
Sure. First of all, a little bit of an introduction because I'm a relatively new member. My name is John Hecht, Kelvin is K6KOI, live in Del Mar, and I'm retired. I'm a retired attorney. I'm not an electronics engineer or a technician, but somewhere along the line I picked up a little bit of knowledge, enough to be dangerous probably. And keep in mind that I know a lot of you are very technically trained. My training has all been the fun of learning this stuff, and it's interesting. You know, I was active in ham radio. I got my license in 1958 when I was 13, and I was active through high school, a little bit in college, completely dropped it in law school, and then in, I guess it was 1972, I had graduated law school, I moved to San Diego, was fortunate to get a job here, and married a child, actually 2 children at that stage, and I saw this ad in the newspaper in the San Diego Union for a Viking 2 transmitter, and so I couldn't resist it. I went to the guy's house, it was like $25 or $30 with the VFO, and I'm hauling this thing out to my car, and he said, "Do you have a receiver?" I said, "No, I don't." I said, "Well, I've got one of those too." And so he had a Hallicrafters SX40 or S40A, and that was another $25. So I had $50 invested in a station just about ready to go. And I started to leave, and he said, "That'll cost you about $3,000. I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You'll find out." Yeah. Anyway, so boat-acres basically, or vintage radios, are a lot of fun. Ron mentioned, the reasons we collect. They're just, it got my interest back into ham radio. I got into it and I got out of it and I got into it. And the last time I got back into it, I bought a Collins S-Line, and that was it. I was hooked. Where do you find these things? There are lots of places that are available to find them. Online services are obviously one place. The greatest variety of equipment that you'll find is on eBay. I'd rather be a buyer than a seller on eBay. eBay is very protective of buyers, which is a good thing. But then there's certain code words you need to know about eBay, like didn't have the power cord to turn it on, which means it doesn't work. eBay has its dangers. Part of the reason why some people will put on eBay that it is not working or its condition is unknown is that they're afraid of the recourse if the buyer blows it up, which you can do very easily with some of these old radios if you don't know how to tune them up, or scavenge parts out and say they weren't there. So eBay is a little bit sketchy, but there is a lot of stuff available on eBay, and particularly parts it's just a wonderful place to find parts. QTH.com is another source. I think I trust people a little bit more on QTH, although if I was going to buy something expensive and really not want to reduce my risk, I would get the telephone number, I would talk to the person. Obviously, if they're local, that's preferred, but that's if you're incredibly lucky. Usually they're not local, which is a problem, by the way, with boat anchors, because if they're heavy, they're very expensive to ship and they can get damaged. But anyway, QTH.com is a good source for boat anchors. Another one is Craigslist. We have, both Riverside, well, San Diego, Riverside, LA, and Orange County all have ham radio listings under the category of electronics. If you just search ham, they'll all pop up, or most of them will pop up, and it's a good source. Another source, which is, I'd never really known about this until I got a call from a friend who, put friend in quotation marks, maybe kind of a competitor in a lot of ways, but he's into these things. He's into kind of buying and selling. I buy and keep, but he buys and sells. And his car wouldn't start. And so he called me because of what he thought was a great opportunity. He wanted somebody to find out about it. And so he called me. It was an estate sale. And he found out about the estate sale from something called estatesales.net, which is a nationwide thing, and it's obviously more than ham radio stuff. It's furniture, it's all the stuff that estate sales have. But again, if you search local, you can narrow the search down to a locality, and you can search a word like ham radio. If you search ham, you probably end up getting, like parts of pigs. But anyway, use your creativity. Anyway, to finish that real brief story, he told me about this estate sale. I went to the place, I procrastinated, and the next day after the sale started, almost everything was gone except for parts. Lots and lots and lots of parts. And so I scored big. I got some tubes for one of my amplifiers that are very rare, 8122 ceramic tubes. I think they were $10 a piece. They sell for over $100 a piece. That's an example of something that's a little bit odd that a lot of people haven't heard of, estatesales.net. Swap meets. TRW in Los Angeles has a once-a-month swap meet. There's a swap meet in Chino Hills. There's one in Santee, which I don't think is really all that popular. There isn't that much stuff there, unfortunately. There's one coming up in Yuma, Arizona. When is that?
Friday the 20th.
The 20th? Okay, so it's coming up. And that's a darn good swap meet. I know it's a bit of miles to get there, but last year Ron and I went there, and it was pretty. There was a lot of good stuff and reasonably priced. Let's see, swap meets. Let's see, there's Palm Springs coming up too. Palm Springs is coming up in March 14th on that Saturday. Okay. And HRO has been having swap meets. I think they've had 2 or 3 now, and they're local, and it's just a lot of fun. Get to meet some people and tell lies, which is something we're all familiar with. There's some swap nets on 40 meters. There's Murray's net on 7.235. I think it starts probably around 11 o'clock a.m. on weekdays. And on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, they have a list of items that are for sale. Usually starts around 11:45 or so. And on weekends, 7240, 7.240 megahertz. From 12:30 to 3 o'clock, there is a swap net that has a lot of the San Diego, Los Angeles, Riverside, Arizona, the stuff that's relatively close by. There's a Catalina repeater, and somebody's going to help me out here. I don't remember the frequency of it.
4709.
Okay, 147090. Okay. Okay, and it's Sunday nights. Monday nights. That's right, Monday nights. Obviously I haven't tuned into that much, but that's kind of fun, and they go through the real call, etc. I found that if I watch about half of the news hour on PBS and then go upstairs, I can catch it. If I watch the whole news hour, I miss it. So anyway, that's another one. Lastly, in terms of where to find them, on 3870, on 75 meters, there's an AM net on Wednesdays, and they have a swap thing Monday and Wednesday. And what are the times, do you remember? 7 p.m. And 3895, and this is a fun roundtable to listen to. It's a vintage SSB roundtable, and it's not that much of a source of material as it is just to encourage you to collect this stuff. There are people that are technically inclined, they're old school, courteous, none of this rude behavior that sometimes we encounter on the vans. Very enjoyable group of people on 3895 on Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. Ron, I'm going to turn it over to you for what to buy, some of our favorite stuff. Which is some of the, see the picture.
Yeah, this is, the pictures you see here are out of my collection. Some of the stuff I don't have anymore, I just went through some pictures and put it on a memory stick here to show the kind of things. Most of the stuff I still have. This is a Heathkit transceiver. I don't have this one anymore, but they're very common for collectors. The next question is, what do you want to buy? How do you decide what would be the appropriate thing? And it's really a matter of personal preference. One thing to be careful of as we're all getting older, some of these things weigh as much as a small planet. And if you're not up, like this one we just moved tonight, it took 3 of us.
I was 6'6" before we started.
So if you're concerned about swinging around big items, you might want to stick with some of the newer stuff starting in the late 50s through the 60s, like that transceiver we showed before. This is 1957, and it's also probably weighs 80 pounds. And once you put it in place, that's not a problem, but if you have to work on them, it's becoming difficult. Okay, if there's something that you always wanted, for example, that one Viking Valiant that was up there, that was the first radio I ever spoke over when I was 12 years old. Some guy in my hometown had one, so I wanted one for nostalgia purposes. If you just want to get into it, pick what's convenient. And as John mentioned, shipping the heavy ones is not a good idea. Not only the expense, but these things don't travel well. And some people don't pack things. I think Bob can tell you, people take an 80-pound radio and throw it in a box and take it down to FedEx, and it's in pieces when you get it. But there's lots of opportunities locally if you keep your eyes open, and if you're not real particular about a particular make and model. This is an old Heathkit novice receiver. There are a lot of small things that are interesting. Personally, I like things that are unusual, that there were not too many of them made, and also things that are milestones. One of my favorites, and John has one also, is this that Bob AK6R brought. This is called Central Electronics 20A. And this was the first really successful sideband transmitter from about 1953, 52, something like that. They had some that were earlier. They had the plug-in coils. This was a band switching rate. They made thousands and thousands of them, and it was largely responsible for the transition from AM to sideband. That's the kind of thing I like, and I write about them. There's a magazine called Electric Radio, which is another good source of equipment. They have classified sections. I write for them quite frequently, and there's articles on restoring and whatever. But anyway, that's the stuff that I like. The next question is, once you got it, you've got it working, what do you do with it? And some people leave them on the shelf to look at. Some people use them every day. There are classic radio contests and events. There's one coming up next week, runs for a whole week, that features just novice-type transmitters from the 50s and 60s. But one of the things I really like about operating vintage equipment, when you get on sideband or AM or even CW, and people say, ask about your equipment, and you get the old timers, and you really get interesting conversations going. People that remember using them or wanting them, or had them and wish they had them back, or they got them stacked up in their garage. But if you get on 75 sideband in the evenings, mostly you hear people talking about their last anima. And this is, you get a few, some more interesting conversations. So that's what I like them about. Anyway, once you've got them, how do you get them working? And I'm going to turn that over to John.
Just one I was noticing the pictures you brought. Some of these things are just classic looking, and they came from the golden age, not just of ham radio, but of manufacturing in the United States. I mean, look at some of the industrial engineering. This is not exactly the example I had in mind. There was a Helicrafters, and that's Japanese, but anyway, there's a Helicrafters SX-101, and I think it's got to be an industrial engineer success, if ever there was one. It's just gorgeous. It'll come up here. And that's not too shabby either. Anyway, I mean, there's history here. And this is not just ham radio history, this is U.S. history. We were leading the world in these areas in electronics manufacturing before it all went offshore. A lot of it did. Okay, so what can you do and what do you do with them? Ron covered a lot of that. I'd like to just add a few little details of once you get that package, you know, what do you first do with it? Careful inspection is really appropriate. I can't tell you the things I found inside some of these radios. Some of them were actually alive still. Spiders, mice, you know, interesting. So I'm exaggerating, it's maybe only 10% of the time, but anyway, a careful inspection because you might find, you know, frayed wire which is going to short. Be a little bit careful of high voltage capacitors. You know, they are supposed to always have be discharged by bleeder resistors. Sometimes the bleeder resistors are open. Sometimes maybe the equipment was used shortly before you got your hands on it, and that capacitor, you know, could still have a charge. And one of the dangers of this stuff is it's not 12 volts. Okay, even receivers, these tube or so-called hollow state devices, use high voltage of somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 to 300 volts on the plates of the tubes. That's enough to kind of, you know, keep it from depression, let's put it that way. If it's a linear amplifier, it's lethal. And that's actually true of transmitters as well. The plate voltage on these, like Heathkit Apaches, DX100s, and even DX40, anywhere from like 600 volts. That'll get your attention. So be careful of the capacitors that they don't have a charge. And what I always do, always, 100% of the time, is I discharge them. I short them to ground before I start messing with them. Just, even if I know they don't have a charge, it's just habit, just do it. How do you get documentation? A couple of good, really good sources if it didn't come with a manual. One is BAMA, B-A-M-A, just Google it. It'll get you to a site which has got Boku manuals, all for free, in PDF and sometimes other formats, but a lot of it's PDF and real easy to print. There's also, a lot of people have not heard of this one, but it's really helpful. It's called MODS, MODS.DK. It's out of Europe. And the thing I like about it is it's got a lot of test equipment. It's also got some transistorized stuff. BAMA doesn't have too much transistorized stuff. Their user groups. Yahoo's got some great user groups for Swan transceivers, Helicrafters, Cubic, you name it. It's got user groups, and they have documentation, not just, you know, manuals and schematics, but war stories and modifications. It's just really good stuff. Let's see, so you got this thing, what do? You inspect it, you might want to make sure it's got a fuse. If it doesn't, you might want to do that modification, look for frayed wiring. Check before you plug it in, check the capacitors, at least with an ohm meter, to make sure they're not shorted. That won't show you a high voltage, or a short that will show up with high voltage, but it'll show you if it's a dead short. It's something that's very easy to do. Just put it across the terminals and see if you get a reading, you should not get any kind, you should have infinite because it's a capacitor. It's not supposed to pass DC. So, unless it's shorted. Use a variac. Variac is a variable voltage transformer. So when you first turn on the piece of equipment, it's at a lower voltage. Less smoke, lower voltage, less smoke, good thing. Okay, so by the way, expect that some of these things are going to drift. Maybe I should modify that. Expect all these things are going to drift. And so think of it as ham radio as an aerobic exercise. You get to actually move something, while you're trying to stay on frequency. I'm exaggerating. Some of these are actually very stable. That's not an example of one that's stable, that little UFO, but is it really? I doubt it. I doubt it. I've got one. I know. Okay. But like the old Drakes, they're wonderful. The Swan 350 was called the Swan 3 Drifty. So you can kind of get an idea. There's some that drift and some that drift a lot and some that drift a little, but they all kind of drift because they don't have a phase lock loop. They, unless you get a more modern piece of equipment, it's not a phase lock loop, and you've got variable capacitors that heat up and the plates expand. Collins used a variable inductor, as I recall, so it drifts a lot less. But as the heat makes the middle expand, the frequency changes. Kind of fun, actually. It's not the same as using what people in a derogatory way call an appliance piece of equipment. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I've got a K3 and I love it. But you have to do things like you have to dip the final. Well, that means you basically resonate the final such that you're getting the power not dissipating the plate of the final amplifier, but going through the coax to the antenna. You're matching it, basically. You're matching the impedance. And if you get an old transmitter, talk to one of your buddies that's got one if you've never done it before, because otherwise you can ruin it pretty quickly if you don't tune it up properly. You also tune up the grid circuits. Kind of fun, actually. It's more stuff to play with. Okay, so real quickly, what if it doesn't work? That brings up topics of restoration, repair, and safety. I mentioned I'm a retired lawyer. I found that when pieces of equipment didn't work, arguing with it did absolutely nothing. It just didn't work. So I consulted one of my buddies, K6 TWO. I don't know if you know 2-Bill. His name is Bill, and he calls TWO, so he's called 2-Bill. Great, great guy. I'm going to use him as an example because there's 2 Bills in this audience, lots of them. They can help mentor you if you're not familiar with this stuff. I took the extra class exam, I passed it. The only question I missed was the law question. Interesting. But I didn't know much. Keep it, forget about the profanity for a moment. But I did not really know much about electronics. I passed the exam because I could take exams, and I took the train to work back and forth and studied, for a half hour every day and took it in 2 weeks. But I didn't know anything. And I didn't learn anything, not that I know that much, but I know a lot more. I didn't really learn electronics until I started to try to apply it. That is the biggest reason I'm attracted to these boat anchors, is the repair of them and the challenge. It's like a puzzle. It's a wonderful puzzle. And it's a whole different mode of thinking from what I was trained to do as a lawyer. As a lawyer, I had to basically think about issues in parallel of lots of events. If this happens, that'll happen. If that happens, this happens, but that might happen. It's almost chaotic. It's really hard to describe it. It's not a serial kind of reasoning. And I had to learn how to do that. 2-Bill would, every time we talk and I had a problem, he'd help work me through it and say, you have got to isolate. You've got to isolate the problem and check one thing at a time and just do it in a serial. And it took me forever to learn that. I've now forgotten how to do law. But there's, what can I say, I'm retired, so it's okay. But, lots of resources. The user groups again, QST and ARL have lots of articles on how to troubleshoot these things, and but it really does boil down to looking at the block diagram, and these the documentation will show block diagrams, much easier to read than the schematic. They give you an idea of the different stages, and depending upon the symptoms that you have, let's say you've got a receiver and it's just completely, it lights up but there's nothing coming out. Well, you might want to check the audio amplifier. How do you check the audio amplifier? You might just inject a signal to the grid if it's a tube for the first stage, or maybe the last stage, and you work your way one way or the other. You isolate stage and parts per stage, and find out, well, maybe there is sound coming through. Okay, so why am I not hearing anything if I inject an audio frequency signal and it's coming through with nice, 1,000 cycles, I can hear it through the speaker. Why can't I hear anything through the receiver? Then you work your way down to the next stage. And I started actually with the last stage, which is audio amplification. You can go either way. You might check to see if the intermediate frequency amplifier is working, etc., etc. It's really a hell of a lot of fun, and that's probably why I'm in it more than anything else. Again, I'm going to raise in a redundant manner, because it's important, the topic of safety. High voltages are present. One of the pieces of equipment I worked on, which is the most frustrating experience I think I've had in my adult life, was something called the Sideband Engineers SB34, and I actually got 6 of them. Somebody shipped me 6 of these things for a cheap price, and I found out why. SB34 is an interesting, it was actually manufactured, some of them were manufactured in Rancho Santa Fe, and then they moved up to the Bay Area. And it was the first, one of the very first transistorized transceivers, and used really old transistors, which actually the early ones of that model have sockets for the transistors. They're bipolar transistors. And the thing about the SB34 is they are very, very compact, but there is high voltage everywhere because they have tubes for the final amplifier. So safety is really, really an issue with something like that. You've got tube caps sticking out the side of the thing, almost shorting the case. That's how much clearance they provided, not much. And then you've got a terminal strip on the top that's got high voltage. So just be careful of what you work on. And I have this habit of working with one hand only. It's, the idea that you don't really want a path of DC voltage going from one hand to the other hand right through your heart. Bad things happen, particularly if you have a pacemaker, which I don't, thank goodness. I mentioned the high voltage maps again, short them. Consider replacing the AC cord, which invariably will not have a grounding terminal. It will be a 2-pole plug. A lot of people want to keep things original. I think that's ridiculous. I think safety first, and it's a good idea to do that. Let's see, kind of running out of topics here. Well, let me, for a moment, I'm going to turn this over to Ron because he brought some test equipment. I'm just going to basically mention the things that I use in order of how often I use them in terms of tools and equipment for this kind of work. DVM, digital voltmeter, I use it every day. VTVM, which Ron will show you a good example. When you pick them up for what? How much? 10 bucks, 20 bucks?
You really
$5.
You can't give them. Yeah, at auction things you can't give them away. These were made by the thousands and thousands by Hecht and others. And I don't know, I've had garage fulls of them. We sometimes buy out estates. They all have a couple of them. You literally almost can't give them away. What was that about it? This is an RF signal generator, which is a good thing for aligning receivers and testing receivers. It gives you a signal source of known frequency, modulated or unmodulated. This is an audio generator that also generates audio frequencies, different frequencies and different volume. They're adjustable. This is also a Hecht kit. Another Heathkit piece is a scope, which is handy for tracing signals and finding out if circuits are working. And these are all, these pieces of test equipment are very inexpensive. These are, to me, the four basic units that you can do most of your work with. And if you go to a flea market or a swap meet or something, you want them to get all four of them, you get change back from $100. They're not very expensive at all. You get people to give them to you.
The problem is you need test equipment to fix your test equipment.
And usually, though, they're pretty reliable. The other thing I was going to mention in terms of safety, this is a good example of an early low-end receiver. And this is called an AC/DC receiver. There's no power transformer in it. And just like the old 5-tube radios that you had when you were a kid. The trouble with these is one side is grounded to the chassis. So if you have the plug in one direction, the chassis will be hot to ground. Some of them like this have insulators so that the case is insulated from the chassis. But I wouldn't trust them after 70 years if this one was old. What you need is something called an isolation transformer if you're going to work on AC/DC equipment.
Which, by the way, one of the problems is that this type of equipment was made for 110 to 115 volt AC. We've got like 122 at our house, which is real difficult. If you get an isolation transformer that has variable voltage, drop the voltage down to like 115, it makes the equipment a lot happier.
Yeah, but the big thing in terms of AC/DC is the safety. Using an isolation transformer, it's like you're walking around holding one end of the AC line in your head. So be real careful of those. Were you done with your?
In terms of test equipment, other things that I just made a list of things I use all the time. Everything that Ron mentioned. I use also something called an RF voltmeter. Booten, I think, is the manufacturer. And it's really, really helpful to measure low signals, low signal levels. It goes, I think, up to 3 volts, as I recall. I use a frequency counter all the time in checking circuits. Let's see, power supplies. And these, again, you pick a lot of this stuff up at swap meets. I've got some high voltage power supplies, which I think I've used more than 2 times. But I've been working on a lot of solid state stuff, and having good bench current limited power supplies that are very accurate in terms of the variable voltage that you set, really, really helpful. Use them all the time. I had here another thought I wanted to leave with you about the restoration game. A lot of people make modifications. Other people think they don't want to do that because they want it to be original. I tend to like, I'm very pragmatic, I like the thing to sound good. If you get some of these old AM transmitters, it was very interesting. A good example is Heathkit Apache. At that time when the Apache was offered for sale, sideband was really coming on, and so AM manufacturers of AM equipment were trying to compete with sideband, which is so much more effective in terms of communication ability. And they would narrow the passband of the audio, so it sounds real limited on some of these old transmitters. In fact, the Apache was fondly known as the scratchy Apache. But there's a real simple way to cure that. And again, lots and lots of articles. Very simple, take about maybe a half an hour. If you've got one of these transmitters, take a look at the coupling capacitors that are in the audio stage. You'll find that they're very, very low capacitance to knock out the low frequency audio. And all you do is just parallel 0.01 capacitor, this capacitor, to increase it to from 0.001 or whatever they use to add the 0.01, and all of a sudden you've got beautiful sounding audio. And in the Apache, you pull out a dual diode tube called 6AL5 that takes out of the circuit the limiter. They have a limiter circuit that it just opens up the audio. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
And some of them take a half hour. I got a DX100, which was the predecessor of the Apache. The picture, it's in the pictures up there. It also weighs about 100 pounds. And when I got it, got it working, and another boat anchor friend of ours said, you got to do this modification for the audio. And he sent me a little diagram and said, this is the place in the circuit, change these capacitors. And I followed the circuit, I followed it, I couldn't find the capacitors. So I looked in the instruction manual, it was a kit, so I looked to see where those were put in. And it was on a board that was built separately. And in big letters it said, make sure you do this board right, because once you get it in, you ain't never getting it out. I managed to do it, but that one took a little more than a half hour. But that's part of the challenge. And at this point, we have a few other people that we're lucky to have in the room. Bob, AK6R, Bob Luther, Bill, who are, maybe some others who are very experienced with restoration and repair. I wanted to ask these three guys, is there anything, or anyone else, is there anything you'd like to add or correct or tell us we're all wet about?
I think having a good tube tester helps.
Yes, good idea. Tube tester. Yeah.
One thought about that, tube testers are not particularly accurate in terms of performance of the tube and circuit, but while they'll tell you if they're shorted, and if they're a shorted tube and you turn on that piece of equipment, you'll see smoke. So yeah, good for no.
Yeah.
Any kind of tube.
Yeah, if the tube tester says the tube is bad, it is. If it says it's good, it might be. Would that be about right? Anything else you want to add, man?
No, I think you went over all the basic equipment and stuff, and it's good that EPBMs, even though they're old, they're very high beats.
Yes.
And so they don't load down the circuit like all the new testers, the free ones you get at Hardware Freight. Don't load down the circuit. How much actually measuring it? This is what you're really.
By the way, I almost broke down.
No, yeah.
DTBM, yes.
Well, when you mentioned the free ones you got at Harbor Freight, I was using one just to have handy when I was off the bench with it, and I just went to check the output voltage of about an 800 volt transformer in a transmitter, and I put it on there, and it's a big spark, and it blew the fuse. The thing had shorted internally. The meter was bad.
Most of those meters aren't good for more than a couple hundred volts.
No, well, it was within range, it said. Brian is another person I should have mentioned. I'm sorry I left you out. Also very experienced. Would you like to?
I have a comment on, everybody tells you put a variac on and wind the voltage up. Well, it's a good idea, but when you do it, the rectifiers are not turned on, so you're not necessarily applying voltage very well to all the factors. It's very easy to just pull the rectifier out, and you don't really have to do that, and apply a DC voltage from a standard power supply, and you can easily get a solid state power supply that's going to be up to 30 volts. If you slowly wind that up, you've got over the worst problems associated with that.
Well, that's a good point. I do something a little different. I have a plug-in solid state rectifier that fits into a 5U4 socket or 5Y3. So if I'm using the variac, just to explain what he's saying, when you use a variac and you set it to 50%, for example, the rectifiers have a 5 volt filament, is only getting 2.5 volts. It's not really giving you much voltage out of it. But if you use a solid state rectifier, that's not a factor. It gives a proportionate amount of voltage. So that's what I do.
And another safety point is that a lot of the transceivers, usually the transmitter tubes have the anode as the top cap. We seem to really have that, and in fact the later, only the really early ones had
grid caps, yeah. Most of that's pre-war.
Right, and if you have a transceiver you're working on, in the early stages, it's a good idea to totally disconnect the transmitter power supply. And we have a central electronics one that has, you take the case off, and the first thing you've got are two tubes with 800 volts on them.
Right.
Really easy to take.
Many of them. Some of them have cages over them that you have to take off, but not as many as there should be.
Right, the one we were working, the central electronics one we have, it has nothing on there. You open it up and you've got
There it is.
800 volts right there. So it's better to disconnect that, especially if you've got a problem with the receiver. You might be working on that for a few days. Well, for a few days of turning this thing upside down, you must forget that you've got 800 volts on that.
Yeah, you'll get reminded real fast. Bill, did you want to add anything?
I just wanted to put an ad in for Southern California Antique Radio Society. They're coming up with their annual auction up in Orange on February 21st.
Same weekend as you.
Is Yuma naturally?
Unfortunately, same weekend as Yuma. But of late, they have been getting an awful lot of amateur radio equipment, transmitters and receivers up at that auction.
I got a Telegraphers SX100 4 years ago at Carlsbad at their meet for $75.
Yeah, there's some very good deals there. What did I get? Oh, I got a homebrew transmitter, that, not the one I got from you, but more recently, a beautifully built AM CW transmitter from 1957 QST that was just gorgeous. Bob, how about you?
Safety is paramount. You know, we read in QST, CQ about hams getting in trouble putting up antennas. We don't see the stories about them working on it.
Right.
And I'm sure there's a couple there every year.
Yeah, and you know, one more story that I heard is a fellow that was working on a linear amplifier, and he unplugged it, and the bleeders were not on. All the bleeders were working. He killed him. He killed him. He pulled out the tube. He probably touched the anode of one of the tubes and it killed him. Just from the capacitors. It was unbelievable.
Don, did you have a point?
Yes, there was a question. When you're running your units up on a variac and it's something you're totally unfamiliar with, you just got it in the mail. You don't know when the last time you fired it. How long do you recommend running it up to 50% or higher until the capacitors are rejuvenated if possible?
You know, that's a good point that you make. One of the other pieces of test equipment that you can get, they're usually a little bit more expensive, are capacitor checkers. And with the electrolytic capacitors, as they get older, many times they become deformed.
Much like us.
Yeah. Only they're easier to fix. And the way you do it is by putting a voltage through it and bring the voltage up little by little. And I'll get back to how long. What I do is take the capacitors out, put it on this capacitor checker, and there's the Hecht ones have switches. Some of the other ones just have a variac type of thing where you can vary the voltage. And it'll tell you what the leakage is. You shouldn't have much leakage through the capacitor. But if you have a capacitor rated for, say, 250 volts, turn it up to 50 volts, and it might show too much leakage. You just leave it there. And eventually, it'll start to come down, the leakage voltage, the leakage current will start to come down. Boost it up another 20 volts or so. And do that little by little. But the right way to do it is with something that will measure the current going through the capacitor. If you don't have a capacitor tester, you can just disconnect one end of the capacitor, put a milliammeter in series with it, and you can find charts or formulas to say what's an allowable leakage current.
I don't know, I caught that. You don't need to use a variac to reform a capacitor. You use one of these Hecht devices.
Yeah.
A 28 or whatever it's called.
You know, there's an IM28 or IT28. There are several different models, and Nightkit made them, and ICO had them, and I have one that's made by Sprague, that's a big industrial one. Yeah, Mitch.
I don't think you mentioned recapping in general with wax, paper.
Well, we didn't want to get that far into it, but you're right.
You have to look at recapping,
You know,
all out the gas and put panels in there.
some people do and some people don't. Generally, they're not going to cause a big problem if they're shorted or open, but some people will go in and just take them all out. The old wax capacitors, you can tell if they're bleeding a lot of wax out of them. You might want to replace them. Some people like to keep things as original as possible, Some people, I think, are fanatics about it if they find a bad capacitor, which were much, much bigger. A bypass cap might have been this big 50 years ago, and now they're this big. Some people actually hollow out the old capacitor and put a new one inside, so it all looks original. I've never done that. I don't see myself doing it. But to each his own, you know, some people restore cars to like they came out of the showroom. But everybody's, you know, everybody has their own ideas. But just to give you an idea on the capacitors, just this week, I had a little novice type transmitter called a Globe Chief 90, and it blew the fuse. And I couldn't find anything wrong with it. I checked the capacitors briefly, they seemed to be okay. There was a filter cap in it, but there didn't seem to be anything else. I put it on my capacitor checker. It was a 700 volt rated capacitor, and up to about 400 volts, there was no leakage. I put it up to the next step, I don't remember, it was 450 or 500, and it was a dead short, but only when it had 500 volts on it.
One of the arguments for replacing some of these old electrolytic, particularly low paper capacitors, is that they can do some damage. Depending on where they're in the circuit, they start passing high voltage DC, where you really only want to pass an RF low level signal. You can have real problems and destroy.
And especially the electrolytics can take out the power.